Is Valerie here?
It is our second.
Oh, okay.
You sent it to me. All right, it is 5 o'clock. We're going to call the committee to hold to order. We have one item on the agenda. It is the 2025 Legislative Agenda Development Update. And we have with us, I think maybe for his first time, Eric Perry to give us a presentation. The floor is yours, sir.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Council President Prince, members of the council. For the record, yeah, Eric Perry, Government Affairs Manager with the City of Renton, and indeed it is my first time speaking to you publicly. Started back in mid-May, so very much looking forward to this opportunity tonight and grateful for your time. As we jump into this, I know you all are very informed on everything kind of going on in Olympia and the state legislature. And have been good partners. That was loud. Good partners as I've worked with you to kind of identify what the agenda will look like this year. So as we kind of jump into it, I do just want to start off by saying this is not the final agenda. Obviously, there's more work to be done between now and the end of the year as we approach the legislative session. But I did want to come provide a more substantive update to you all on an update on my conversations with you all, conversations with staff, and other entities outside of the city of Renton. So as we start, I did just want to take this quick opportunity to kind of retouch on what the high level goal here is. It's a simple statement of create, recommend, and adopt an informed 2025 legislative agenda. So obviously we are in the creation stage of that, and we are working towards making this an informed agenda so that it is impactful both for the community and for all the ongoing matters at Olympia, make sure it's relevant in that respect too. So how are we getting to this goal? Really to kind of highlight the steps taken to date, you'll see that, as I've kind of mentioned, that we met one-on-one several times just to talk as I familiarize myself with the city of Renton and each of your individual priorities to make sure I get a good sense of that. I've conducted meetings with the city's staff to kind of identify where their priorities are, what issues they're facing, and what not. We've also reviewed and aligned where applicable these identified priorities with that we kind of noticed within the 2023 community survey. And so just to make sure we're aligning with what residents are telling us they want to see from their city government. And then lastly, meeting with various other cities around the region, agencies, and other relevant organizations to identify any opportunities that we can potentially collaborate on or any issues that we're experiencing together where collaboration might be beneficial in addressing it. As for the next steps, again, just to explicitly state, this is not the final agenda. There are a lot more important steps to be taken before we bring forth our recommendations to you all. I think the really most crucial step from here until we get to obviously the final vote of this agenda and your inputs on that is taking this to the Equity Commission. So I'm scheduled on October 8th to go present the first draft of our final draft to the Equity Commission and receive their feedback. And then we will incorporate kind of what they give back to us into that final draft. Then later on in late November, we're still working through some of the scheduling. David Foster, who, as you all know, he will come to provide an update on what to expect from the 2025 legislative session from that kind of holistic 10,000 feet point of view. And then following that meeting, we will bring back our final recommendations to council for your consideration in either late November, early December, depending how scheduling it works out there. So certainly within this whole process, there'll be continued opportunities for collaboration between the administration and each individual council member. This is a work in progress, and there are a number of other things out there that will likely have an impact on this agenda as well. So as you all might know, the state agency decision packages were submitted to the governor's office last week. We expect to see those released here in the coming weeks, Election Day in early November, the legislative reorg in late November and early December. And then lastly, the anticipated governor's budget we expect to see by no later than Friday, December 20th. So all of these things will come together in helping shape what our final recommendations will be, again, to get to an informed agenda that we're bringing to council and make sure it's impactful for our community as a whole. So to touch on these specific policy areas, as you all know, we've had conversations where we've kind of been working through some of the high level items. Today I wanted to take a deeper dive, but before we do, just wanted to take one quick second to focus 10,000 feet view on the high level policy focuses and how these align with the business plan, with the community survey, and feedback that I've heard from you all and our staff. I won't list in each of these individually. We'll jump into them specifically as this presentation moves forward. But here are kind of the broad issues that we will be discussing today. And so just to jump right into it, we have budget and fiscal sustainability. These are really kind of policy areas that fall in line with ensuring that the city has the revenue needed to provide crucial services to the community. I won't spend too much time on these individual. Please feel free to jump in at any point with questions, but I will be calling out some specific ones to note. So on this slide specifically, the one I want to call out is that first one on the left side regarding property tax caps. This is an issue which has been discussed in Olympia for a number of years now. It's gaining some steam from what we've been kind of gathering, especially as governments face a greater really just influx of increasing prices and how things are affecting services, and your dollar is going less than what it did before. So we want to support efforts to revise that cap to give local governments more of an option to meet service needs by raising revenue. And with this being a year that we feel that the conversation has the most wind behind it, that we feel this might be a good year to continue having those conversations. Other than that, on this slide, I will just take another mention to call out the state shared and other revenue streams. Obviously, a large portion of our budget, or I can't say large, but a portion of our budget comes from the state to help support these services that we do offer. And I know it's a continual tug of war battle between the state and local governments to ensure that those levels are maintained and that our community receives the support that it does need. On the next slide, again, I really won't dive into all of these, but this is transportation, utilities, and infrastructure. The ones I want to specifically call out on here is that top left one, which is engaging in conversations surrounding transportation revenue to ensure that our local transportation needs are met, with specific focuses on transportation benefit districts and then the larger conversation around local road funding. Transportation benefit districts are one that you are all too familiar with. And it certainly plays a large role in our local transportation needs. There are some active conversations among some of the statewide organizations to look at how can we better refine that process to meet the growing needs of all the communities across the state of Washington. So engaging in those conversations, ensuring that the Renton community is heard in those conversations is really important. And then lastly, the local road funding option on here, whether it be gas tax, the proposed road usage tax, ensuring that we receive some local split from that to continue maintaining our local transportation needs will be equally as important. And then the last two I would just specifically call out on here related to the I-405 corridor. So that's the broad corridor on that specific piece, but then also specific project related to the North 8th Street direct access ramp. As you all know, that kind of what I would call punted by the legislature. So ensuring that that gets completed in a timely manner is really important for the community. And so continuing to maintain a voice on that, even though that conversation has essentially been tabled for the time being, will also be important. On the next slide is under the policy area of public safety and criminal justice. Again, I won't jump into these specifically. I'm happy to take questions at any point. But one I really want to specifically call out as identified by conversations with you all and conversations with our police department is what we can be doing to support efforts to prevent and address juvenile crime. Obviously, behavioral health treatment is a big part of that. Getting upstream of some of those issues is really important, and ensuring that we have the adequate facility capacity to meet those needs, whether it be state correctional capacity or community facility capacity. Ensuring that we have the avenues for those youth to go to is a crucial piece of that conversation. So that's the one I specifically wanted to call out on there. Obviously, I'd also like to make brief mentions of police recruitment and retention. That's a large conversation at the state level right now. Whether that be direct funding for local governments, grant dollars for local governments, or maybe some of the side benefits to police work, such as officer wellness, mental wellness, and injury prevention programs. Under the policy areas of homelessness and behavioral health, again, kind of what you'll see here in our focus has been how do we get upstream of some of these issues to, obviously we have the emergency shelters in place, but how can we best get ahead of that and address some of the core issues that are kind of creating these circumstances. So one I'd specifically like to call out here is the top right one. That's increased investments into programs for vulnerable persons and individuals experiencing homelessness. So meeting the housing need, the permanent shelter space need, and then also sending teams out there specifically to touch base with them to understand their immediate needs and what the long-term supports needed also would have to be there. And then the bottom right one, just to kind of maybe address some of the other issues within the behavioral health space. There's a really big need for more money in the system to support behavioral health treatment and co-responder programs such as the ones that we have here in Renton, like FD Cares and Project Be Free, as well as opportunities to continually expand training for those co-responders so that they are equipped to handle the situations they are asked to handle. Under human services, again, with the focus on upstream supports, we really took a look at youth this year, particularly within some of our departments. That's where a lot of the focus is right now. So school-based health centers, youth programming, community programs, and all those things are really important to addressing the upstream issues and getting to those youth before maybe they get into situations where it's not so great for them. And then the last one I'd like to specifically call out, because you will see outside of Renton, just the statewide push this year to centralize state-led efforts for individuals who are migrants or asylum seekers, particularly given that there was $25 million allocated by the state last year for these services, but the need is a lot greater than just what one individual community can provide. So ensuring that there's a statewide effort in place to provide not only just the emergency services, but the legal and case management assistance as well, to ensure they're not just stuck in a loop of that situation. Under housing, economic development, obviously housing is a huge need within Renton, but also the broader region. So what new tools can we specifically create to incentivize housing development? What tools can a local government get, such as the housing benefit districts, and then more funding for the Connecting Housing and Infrastructure Program. Obviously, housing stability is a big need as well for vulnerable residents. And then lastly, just I think the word that you probably would all be familiar with is local control, maintaining local control, because the needs of Renton are unique than maybe some city on the east side or some city farther south than us. Our housing needs are different, our zoning needs are different, so maintaining local control in that respect. Under parks, recreation, and trail connectivity, you'll see a lot of specific callouts for grant programming here, particularly in that top right point. Urban forestry has also been identified as a huge need within our parks program, or parks department, excuse me. So what can we do to support those programs in an equitable fashion, given the communities such as Renton who will be more hard hit by climate change? What can we do on the front end of that? And then the bottom left slide you'll see here is support robust investments around trail connectivity. So think of programs like East Rail, all that coming to a nexus here in the Renton community. What can we be doing to support that and grow that so that our residents have alternative transportation options rather than just a car? Moving on to environmental sustainability. We have the RAP Act, which was a program that the city of Renton supported last year on our agenda. Some more state investments into stormwater, into the Ecology Stormwater Financial Assistance Program, and other programs like that to support our local needs for water quality. Support more funding with broader eligibility criteria for the State Fish Barriers Removal Board grant program and other programs such as that to help us remove those fish barriers and restore fish passage. And then just lastly, additional funding for any sort of reclaimed water studies that we can be doing at a local level to prepare for drought conditions and protect the resources that we do have here in the community. And then lastly, the broad kind of policy area of just local government. What you'll see here is a lot of the service side of things that we do as a city. So cybersecurity needs, public records, open public meetings, email records, and then funding as well for our municipal stormwater needs. So those have kind of all been drawn in under this large bucket of local government. And again, just things that will help us continue providing a high level of service to the community. So with that being said, I know that was a brief high-level overview, and again, happy to take a deeper dive through questions. But before we did, I just wanted to, again, jump in just as a quick reminder of what these next steps are, because this is not the finalized agenda. I would even remiss to call this an agenda at this point, but more so a more substantive guidebook to where we would like to get by the end of the year. So again, I'll be going to the Equity Commission in October, followed up by returning to this room later on in November and December to present our final recommendations to council for your consideration. And with that, Council President Prince, that's all I have got, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Eric, thank you so much for a really well put together presentation. Are there any questions from council?
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilmember O'Halloran.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of ground to cover in a very short period of time. But one of the things that I did want to ask you about is when we talked, you had said that there was possibly some sentiment about fixing the Blake fix. Do you know where we are with that?
We have not seen any substantive proposals related to that. Again, that was just gleaned through conversations with some of our local legislators. And speaking with David Foster, he had not heard anything specific either. And I think that's one of the pieces you could point to with what might change between now and December would be if we see any substantive proposals on that front, we would want to address those as a city and take a position on that. So those are one of the things that are still up in the air, but because we didn't have anything firm to date, we didn't want to include it in this update.
And if I may, as a follow-up.
Please.
I'm struggling to know where that would fit in here. Is it public safety? Is it homelessness and behavioral health? Is it human services? Where?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of those things that's in reality probably touched by almost every single department within the city. And taking a comprehensive approach to it is certainly one of those issues. If you had to kind of nail it down to a specific, specific policy area, I would probably say it depends what the proposal looks like. It could be public safety, it could be human services, it could be homelessness, all of those things that, depending on what that specific statement we are taking, as it could fit into any of those.
We're not likely to see anything from that until after the elections
Yeah.
with all of the House and half the Senate running. So we'll probably see something after November 5th. Any other questions from council? Councilman Rivera.
Thank you. In regards to police mental health and everything, I know we touched on this. Are we going to be specifically asking around the caveat where law enforcement personnel will lose their pension if they report or diagnose as PTSD? Are we going to be specifically making recommendations around that? Because for many years, I think that's been really an issue, that those law enforcement officers that pursue mental health and are diagnosed with PTSD risk losing their pension as a result of that. And I don't feel like that's a good thing.
No, I think that's a fair point. And we're certainly at the point now where, because we haven't seen any specific proposals, that we don't have that specific of an action item. I think if that were to come out, we would certainly take a position on that. Depending on how this council would like to proceed, if that should ever come up, we would take direction from you all. But we would certainly want to address that specifically.
Oh, thank you. And follow up to that. What up, giggles? So with that, how well do we work in terms of helping to draft legislation with our current legislators when it comes to certain issues? Another thing that comes to my mind is the increase in juvenile justice. What we saw in the last couple of years is the closing of 3 state facilities, which has kind of resulted in now this drama with DCIYF closing their doors, and then now we have 13 counties suing them. Is there and now there's conversations around opening up a wing at Stafford Creek, which is an adult facility for offenders between 18 and 24. Are we working in terms of drafting, leading legislation rather than just kind of seeing what comes up? Have it be police, mental health, or juvenile justice? Are we taking the lead in any of that?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
And I can't speak for what we've done historically. It started in May, so still learning that part of this job. But at this point, no, we have not taken the lead in any of those conversations. But we've certainly had substantive discussions with our local legislators about what the issues we're seeing at the local level are, in the hopes that they will take that back to Olympia and take that into consideration for any other legislation that might be out there.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Any other questions from council?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
Can you hear me, guys? Okay. Now I can hear myself. Great work. Wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I have a question regarding the local government. The support updates for the OPMA and help addressing the disruptive activities and hate speech during public meetings. Is this legislation that probably will come next year? And do you know who is sponsoring this?
I don't have a specific sponsor yet, but I would expect to see something along this lines this session. We've heard other cities from across the state really. If I had to really summarize it without being involved in those situations, that they've had incidents where maybe a council meeting or any sort of other open door meeting was affected, and they maybe didn't have the best guardrails around how to navigate that. So I think what these other cities are looking at would be clarifications and more tools for local governments to continue facilitating an open dialogue between their electeds and the community. But we have not seen any specific proposals related to that yet.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know what the timing is on this, but do you anticipate any situation in which Renton would have opposing views to something coming out of SCA, for example, or are these largely regional priorities?
Yeah, I think it's a fair way to represent that. There certainly might be issues. I can never guarantee that that we don't kind of run crosswise of any of the other maybe statewide and regional representation groups. But what I do know about those organizations, if there's anything what I would probably deem as controversial between their members, they often will not pursue that. So I wouldn't expect to see anything like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Eric, normally when the legislative agenda is presented to the council in the previous years, they presented also the regional priorities as well as the federal priorities. Are we expecting to see those in November?
No, not in November. Given that's started in May, I've been learning a lot about the city of Renton and our region. My focus has primarily been on the state legislative agenda of things while working on the regional and federal agendas, but those will not be in November. Those will be some point early next year.
Thank you.
President.
Yes.
Yes, just to follow up on that point. I think I totally get that. The priority being on the state being the time. I would definitely put federal in the next in queue, knowing when they're going to be starting up following the election and when community project funding requests are due and such like that. So definitely support that notion. And I do want to thank you for presenting the timeline of everything here. I think that was very helpful, and excited to see that we're going to get feedback from the Equity Commission. So I think that'll be really valuable insights for us.
I second that.
All right. I think we've had you under the spotlight long enough, Eric. Great job. With that, the committee of the whole is adjourned, and we are heading over to a reception to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks.